Claire Vermeulen is a young woman who has a great passion for writing. Her heart's deepest desire is to write pieces that ignite a hope in people and to encourage those who have been hurt. Today she shares a story about how God changed her perspective, about stories untold. Over the past few months, I've become rather fascinated with the concept that everyone has a story, but not everyone has shared their story. We are in a world where living stories are constantly crossing paths. I was in Cape Town when this idea I've been pondering on for so long came to life. I stumbled into a teeny tiny cafe called Sonder. This cafe was founded on the neologism that every stranger has a story. The significance of this moment was that without even trying, I found a place that was able to put into words what I was feeling all along. A young woman had been confronted with the reality of this concept during COVID and was inspired to create a place where all stories could come together and belong. Although my perspective is ever so slightly different due to my relationship with God, I came to the realization that the probability that there are a whole bunch of people out there wondering the exact same thing as me is significantly great. I, for one, have spent a vast majority of my life feeling lost and misunderstood, as though nobody could relate to me. I felt alone in my story, as though there was no true character development and that the story or plot line had stagnated. The problem was that this was so far from the truth and that my story had only just begun, but I had allowed the hurts of life to stop the pen from putting ink on paper and continuing the story of my life. I became a closed-off person, not allowing anyone to read my chapters for themselves, but rather me reading them out loud and only sharing what I wanted to. This unfortunately led to more pain and disappointment, because instead of opening myself up to authentic connection, I approached it with disapproval and a big fat no. I was terrified of being fully known. We can't approach life allowing people to see only parts of us and hide the rest and expect to develop meaningful relationships through that. I realized that the reason I lacked the connection I was so deeply seeking was due to my fear and pride, which I had allowed to consume me. I'm sharing parts of my story and journey because through my personal self-discovery and introspection, I gained a newfound insight into why we have untold stories. This world is filled with broken people who are consumed by the fear of vulnerability. The reason for this is the fact that most hurts come from circumstances where people chose to be vulnerable, and unfortunately that vulnerability was not reciprocated or appreciated, and they were left empty and hurt. The way we deal with these hard realities is what makes the biggest difference. Someone once shared the well-known phrase, "You cannot control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it." I would encourage you to just take a moment and let these few words sink in. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. Now, the biggest life lesson I had to learn when the reality of these words sunk in was that, as it is said in Ephesians 6:12, for our struggles is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. I finally saw the truth that was right in front of me this whole time. People are not my enemy. This changed my life, and for the first time I was brave enough, because of God's words, to take out my book and hand it to people to read for themselves without manipulating the story. I was finally ready to connect and to be seen, truly seen. I believe that until we allow God into our hearts and give Him full permission to strip us of all fear and pride, we sit with a book that's incomplete. We hold on to a story that never gets published. We rob people of truth and a chance to be inspired to share their story. Sometimes the untold story begins with us. Sometimes God requires us to begin a movement that inspires the connection that this world is lacking. Our story can ignite a fire and change the lives of the strangers that walk around us.